Is Apple's brand new Final Cut Camera App, it's a pro camera app, is it actually pro? Is it any good? And how does it compare to the best free camera app on the planet? Let's dive into Final Cut Camera. Tim, what's going on, dude? Like, seriously, Final Cut Camera? The connection with Final Cut here, we can see at the very top left. So you can connect other cameras running this app, and you can use Final Cut Pro for iPad to record them all. And yeah, we're not doing that here. We're diving into the proper pro features. We have our different recording formats. So for example, ProRes. We can have ProRes, or we can HEVC the heck out of it, H2.65. And then depending on what mode we're in, these other options up the top can change as well. So HDR or SDR. Now, I know HDR and SDR might mean a lot to everybody, but keep this in mind. If you're recording video on your iPhone and you're recording it in HDR and you dump it into something like Premiere or whatever, unless you've got Premiere set up to automatically adjust, everything looks really weird. And you're like, what happened to my footage? And depending on the computer you have, and either way, the option to just record an SDR standard, essentially, Rec 709, is great. And I would always say just do it there, because unless you're doing HDR video content, it's just an extra step in your workflow that you just don't need. Let's go over to 4K, 1080p, 720p, and then we've got our frame rates as well, 24, 25, 30, and 60. Now, if we go back to ProRes, we're going to see very, very different things, because ProRes will give you HDR, SDR, but it'll also give you log, which is that washed out footage. Now, the thing is, that's going to get the most dynamic range out of the camera. For most folks, they probably don't need it, but the fact that it's here and it's easily accessible is great. And then 4K or 1080. So these settings do change around the actual recording format that you are in. That's it. Now, the thing here is with ProRes, we can see I've got 20 minutes. That's it. That's all the recording time I've got on this phone with ProRes. Otherwise, if we go back to the normal stuff at 4K, I've got 13 hours. So ProRes uses a lot of data, and it's quite smooth to edit as well. Just because it's huge doesn't mean it's a pain in the butt. Now, I'm just going to briefly show you something here. I can instantly start recording in ProRes. However, if I go to the normal iPhone camera app, and you can see it's kind of similar looking, but if I go to video, and if I go to ProRes here, not supported, which is fine, it doesn't support 60 FPS, that's in the other app as well. But if I go here, I'm freeing resources. I'm freeing resources. We know this phone is good for 20 minutes ProRes. We're just, we're still, I can't record, and if I press record, I'm canceling. But with the other app, the Final Cut Camera app, it's ready to go instantly, which is just a nice thing to have. Now, if you have something like a little thumb drive or USB-C device that you want to plug in, like this tiny little Samsung, then you can absolutely, like other camera apps, you can record into this. So once you pop it in, you're going to see this down the bottom, Samsung USB, so you can record onto there. And you can see even at this, which I think is 256 gigs, I've got 38 minutes. Anyway, same thing with audio, but I'll come back to audio in a sec. So let's plug this out. Now, if we look at the rest of the stuff here, we can tap the VU meters. That does absolutely nothing except it's showing you that the audio is recording. However, if you're talking really loud, it still manages to level out just a bit. Now, settings cog. We have got a lot of the similar settings here that we've already gone through, okay? But there's one useful feature, especially if you put your iPhone on something like a phone gimbal, like the OM6, the DJI Osmo, whatever it used to be called, that. Because the stabilization on the iPhone, you had to really dig into the settings to turn it off. And if you forgot about it, then, and because it's dependable to find, the gimbal footage looked really, really kind of weird, because the gimbal is trying to stabilize the phone. The phone was going, what's going on here? And the phone is trying to stabilize everything else. And things just started jittering and just being a little bit sporadic. So the fact that you can turn this on or off directly in this app really intuitively and quickly is a huge win. Now, let's scroll down. We can have our mirror front camera, which is fine, I guess. Tools or grid overlay. So a grid overlay, basically, no matter what way you turn the phone, you're going to get these 9 squares. Now, this is called the, by the way, if you're wondering what this is, yeah, I don't want you guys just looking at a crappy, kind of bust up, wrecked, busy studio here. So that's why we've got some dust absorber stickers over the lens to give you something to look at. Have something intersecting on all of these lines. So for example, you might put your head maybe in the bank center, but you can make the shots a lot more interesting if you're looking at the left quadrant or the right quadrant, or anyway, around those lines. That's where you should be kind of focusing your compositions, your subjects, and so on. It's just a nice guide to have. Let's come back into the settings, and you can adjust that for square or 4:3, depending on the content that you're shooting. But I think at the very least, just have the thing on, whatever, with the aspect ratio guide. Now, the overexposure indicator and the focus peaking are so useful to have. So let's take off these. And if we point up to our light here, we can see there's a lot of zebras, which are basically black and white lines, which shows this part is overexposed. So that's something to keep in mind. It's nice to have that. And then you're going, what the heck? What's all this green stuff? Why is there green lines and stuff? There's green lines and stuff because that's your focus peaking. That tells you these things are absolutely in focus. I would suggest that you have all of these on. And then on the audio side of things, you can plug in a different audio source. So for example, you might have a wireless lav. I have this USB-C Ulanzi wireless lav, and it's just a case of plugging that directly into the phone, turning it on, and then you will see that you can record onto that. Now, if we go down to the bottom of the screen, and don't forget as well, we are going to be diving into something here and comparing this to the best free camera app in the world. So if we tap the little up arrow here, we've got some other options. We can tap it up, and then we've got our white balance. White balance essentially is how warm or cool a scene is. So either very, very kind of orangey yellow or very, very bluey coldy, right? And you can dial this into your particular scene. So for example, a daylight setting is 55-5600. Now, the fact that you would dial it in is because sometimes when the phone is like looking at the scene, it's like it'll set the white balance on one part, and then if something changes in the scene, the white balance might suddenly kind of shift and the colors go a little bit weird, and your audience are going, and it's quite difficult to fix in post. So when you lock it off by just dialing it in yourself, then it just means that it's never going to change. If you tap the little fixed text over here, you can have it back to automatic, which is good, but and then we've other options like shadow, cloudy, tungsten, fluorescent, flash. So you've got a couple of presets that if you want to work off of those as well. Now, if we move over here, if we tap the light icon again, or the white balance icon, and that's how you move back and forth, we can change the exposure, so how bright or dark the scene is. Sometimes I will bring down, nearly all the time actually, have the video set to exposure to like negative 0.3, and you can dial that into whatever you want. Now, this is what a lot of people have missed. If you tap the auto button, ooh, you're in manual, which means you can now control the ISO, and the ISO is kind of how bright essentially the sensor in the phone will get. And remember, the higher the ISO, the more noise it can bring in. And then you have the shutter speed. So if you want to dial in your shutter speed to like that magical cinematic 1/50, this is where to do it. Can't understand why so many people miss this. And then you can change it up all the way up to 1/8000 of a second. Or just leave the phone, do its thing, and go to auto. Right, let's tap that. And then we have our focus. So remember, we spoke about focus peaking things in green. You can have autofocus, which is really good, but if you want to dial it in yourself, you can just go left and right, and that makes a huge difference and can make things very cinematic, and you don't have to worry about the autofocus changing your shot. Alrighty, and then over here, which I'm not sure why they put this in, but basically you can change the kind of the orientation of the UI as well, which is kind of fine. And when you turn it this way, it actually looks kind of pretty cool. There's really good functionality here, and it's an Apple app. I do think some of the design is just a bit weird. A lot of people have missed where that shutter manual control is. How does it compare to something like the Blackmagic Camera App, which is also free? And in my book, it is absolutely the best camera app on the planet. Now, as you can see, it is a little bit more complicated when you look at it. Regardless, there's a lot there, especially if you're starting out and you want to take things up a notch. And you can swap between the lenses like you can on the Apple Final Cut camera app thing, just simply by tapping them. But the Blackmagic Camera App has more functionality in it if you're willing to spend the time getting into it. You can go to settings and you can see there's a whole ton of stuff. So like this and the camera app from Apple, the Final Cut camera app. God damn it, Tim Cook, who comes up with these names? You can change the color space. You can make all the different changes. You can record on a little hard drive that I've just shown you, or you can record with different mics. All of that stuff is there, but there's a lot more in here, and it can be quite overwhelming. Now, for most people, when they're using a camera app, they want that control. So for example, there's no shutter speed here, but it's shutter angle, which is the proper cinematic one. Same idea, but generally it's 180 that most folks would keep their shutter angle at. But either way, you can change this to shutter speed. You have all of that control in here, everything that we've seen. Now, the one thing that this has is the fact that you can put a LUT on. So if you're shooting in log, you will put a LUT on, like Apple have their LUT for correcting the log footage, and it just looks how it should look on the camera, right, on the screen. But other than that, I gotta say, right, the Blackmagic Camera App is phenomenally good. It's got an amazing amount of functionality. But if we look at the camera app from Apple, the new Pro Final Cut camera app, it's got not all of the functionality, but it's got the core functionality. And the fact is, besides one of those two little design arcs, this thing is really easy to use. So both apps are free. Try both of them out. Look at the Blackmagic app. If that's got some of the functionality that you need, then by all means go for it. And it does have a lot more. But the Apple one, it's got a fair whack of stuff that I think will suit beginners or even mid-level enthusiasts who just want that dipping their toes into a little bit more control. Now, it's quite basic. I would love to see what else they're going to add to it, or will it just be forgotten about? But either way, Apple's Pro Camera Final Cut Camera App, god damn these names, it's pretty damn good. Speaking of pretty damn good, this video here, YouTube tells me, and more importantly telling you, that you'll think it's pretty damn good too. So check it out and I'll see you on the next one. Cut.